Hey, everybody, welcome to the most censored views, which is what we call it sometimes. This is a Mint Press project. It's an interview. It's a rare Saturday interview. I've been doing these mostly during the week. So this will be more casual. We'll be having drinks, it'll be pretty wild. Shirts will probably come off a few minutes in. But I have another amazing guest for you. I hope you've been keeping up with these. I just recently talked to economist Richard Wolff. Next week will be Julian Assange's wife, Stella Morris. Last week was also Julian Assange's father, John Shipton. A lot of great guests, and I hope you've been enjoying them at youtube.com/behind the headlines. And the series of great guests continues right now. An old friend of mine, he's a journalist now for the Gray Zone, and he's been killing it on the Ukraine beat mainly. But we'll get into a lot of different topics here, and I think a lot of information that you probably haven't yet gotten. So please hit the like button. Please throw in all the comments you can think of. And here's Alex Rubinstein. Hello.
Hey, Lee. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. How you been?
I've been well.
Good. So you've been on the Ukraine beat over at Gray Zone.
I guess I'm a beat reporter now. Yeah.
And your articles have been excellent. I had a tough time deciding which one to focus on, but I thought we'd start with breaking down some of the components of of Ukraine's military. And you've been covering the Georgian Legion, which I did not know much about, but is a fascinating aspect of what's going on in this proxy war. So maybe we can start off by just explaining what the Georgian Legion is.
Yeah. So Ukraine actually has two main legions that are foreign legions, mostly made up of foreigners, not Ukrainians. One is the International Legion, which was established by Volodymyr Zelensky in the very early days of the war, or I should say, in the very early days of the Russian military operation. But the other is the Georgian Legion, which is not all Georgians. It's also a lot of people from the United States and Canada and other NATO countries and European Union countries. And they've been praised here and there in the media, given good press generally in the mainstream media, but not really covered a lot from a critical perspective. And so I've tried to shine a light on this operation because it really is one of the more brutal mercenary groups fighting in the war. One of the more how should I say it?
Sorry, real quick. Does mercenary mean they're being paid, or are they just kind of they're just showing up to help the cause? And
yeah, I think that's what they like to say, but I can't imagine many people signing up to be on the receiving end of the conventional Russian military's might. And of course they are paid by the Ukrainian government, armed by the Ukrainian government, so in a way they're armed by the United States,
right.
Just indirectly. But they're one of the more media savvy military groups in the war. They've gotten not just a lot of press, but a lot of donations, and part of how they've done that is through an internet trolling operation called NAFO, which you may or may not have encountered, but I think a lot of people who have been active on Twitter discussing the war and digesting it have faced NAFO.
Yeah, they haven't, as far as I know. I mean, maybe I'm just too out of it to realize it. They haven't really come after me, but I've seen many of the responses to them as they go after writers for the Gray Zone or anybody else kind of revealing the truth of what's going on in Ukraine. Remind people what NAFO stands for.
Yeah, it's North Atlantic Fellas Organization. So it's NATO, but instead of a treaty, it's fellas. And that's what they call each other. It's very cult-like. There's like a lot of in-group terminology that would be very confounding to somebody who's not a member
Right.
of the organization. They call me a vatnik. They call others a vatnik. It's like a pejorative for a Russian person. A term I had never heard before.
Even though you're not Russian.
Well, I mean, I guess if you go back far enough, I am Russian, but
you go back four
couple generations. Yeah. So I mean, they've they were platformed by CSIS. It's a think tank funded by the United States government in Washington, one of the leading militaristic pro-war think tanks, leading policy in Washington, making policy papers. And Michael Weiss, who was who is a think tanker and very strong advocate of the war in Syria, very fond of the so-called moderate rebel groups that were beheading children. So, I mean, all the usual suspects have kind of rallied behind this troll operation called NAFO. And there's Matt Moores, the co-founder of NAFO at CSIS. I mean, mercenaries, Matthew Van Dyke, he was a mercenary in Syria. He helped cover up rebel use of chemical weapons. He's a member of NAFO. Michael Weiss is a member. And then you have endorsements from, I believe, the Prime Minister of Estonia, the Defense Minister of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, all these high and NATO officials themselves too have endorsed this group NAFO, and it's partnered with an operation called United 24, which was launched by Zelensky as the main crowdfunding operation for Ukraine. They've officially partnered with NAFO, and again, this is an organization which was started as a fundraising operation for the Georgian National Legion, which is this mercenary group that has carried out documented war crimes and is accused of many more war crimes. And I document all that in my series of articles. Really nasty stuff, shooting on video, captive Russian soldiers. There's audio testimony from a quote unquote volunteer with the Georgian Legion called Benjamin Velcro, where he attests to them having captured an 18-year-old Russian kid accused of being a spy, slit his Achilles tendon, and forced him to swim across the river as they took practice shots at him. I spoke to an American guy by the name of Henry Heft, who volunteered with them, and he told me about how two men had blown a checkpoint, and the Georgian Legion put a black bag over their heads, took them to a basement, and cut their throats. Accused them of being spies as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, you wrote an article about him, the guy you just referenced, back in March.
That's right.
And he's an American who ran over to Ukraine to try and help out, I guess, believing U.S. propaganda about what was going on there, and came back very disenchanted, kind of revealing the truth that it was a catastrophe.
Yeah, and woefully corrupt. With all the weapons pouring in, he was being asked to be sent to the front line without a rifle. Obviously not a position you want to find yourself in. Yeah. And then when he tried to leave,
I don't even know what they would tell him to do. Just stand there and look menacing.
Yeah, right. Menacing enough that you divert the, S-24
right
from the building. Yeah. And then when he tried to leave, he was apparently threatened by the Georgian Legion with his life. He had to basically run away and go back over the Polish border in I believe it was Red Cross vehicle. just pretending to be a civilian.
And I think it's important to let people know this is not like, a left winger who was trying to reveal the truth in Ukraine. This is a pretty far right wing dude who used to be in the Boogaloo Boys and ran over to Ukraine to be part of their military. And even he, once he saw what he saw, came back and said, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into this rabbit hole, but I don't know how far right he is personally. He certainly didn't say anything that raised my eyebrows.
I just meant that he was in the Boogaloo Boys, but
yeah, right. But he wasn't like any kind of Nazi or anything. He wasn't like an alt-right guy who was like, oh yeah, they're so I just don't want to like give a wrong impression of him because he was a source of mine.
Yeah, no, I was not calling him a Nazi. I'm just
no.
I just want people to realize that, like, even someone who's, I don't know, libertarian, right wing, whatever, is went over there and saw what they saw. But.
Yeah, and he came back and was like, "These fuckers are crazy," But yeah, so I mean, there's been a lot of testimony. There's one incident, and I don't have any details on it, where because I did a report on the on this memo from the Department of Homeland Security, where they were saying that they basically had no way of keeping track of the white supremacist extremists that were going over to Ukraine, and they listed an intelligence gap that. They don't know how to keep track of them. They don't know, what experience they might get in Ukraine that they would bring back to the streets of the United States. And in this memo, there were a number of volunteers that were basically stopped and interviewed by authorities, American authorities. And one of them was saying that he was going to join the Georgian Legion, but didn't because he had heard that they had been accused of war crimes, and so he went on to join the Azov battalion instead. But
I'm not, I'm really not keen on this Georgian Legion. I'm going to head over to the Nazis.
Right. Well, and the Georgian Legion is not. They don't. Unlike Azov, they don't really use like explicitly Nazi imagery. But there are Nazis within the Georgian Legion. I did another couple of articles on a figure by the name of Paul Gray, who was a member of several neo-Nazi organizations in the United States, including the Atomwaffen Division, which is considered a terrorist group in several countries. And he's with the Georgian Legion. He got interviewed by Fox News as a hero like 4 or 5 times. He was a regular figure on Fox News until he was outed as a Nazi. But
that's classic Fox News. They're like, look, we'll have Nazis on, but just don't make it too clear.
Right. Yeah. Once everyone knows you're with Atomwaffen, it's, yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of, really questionable figures associated with them. It's commanded by a guy by the name of Mamuka Mamalashvili, who has fought, I think this is his 5th war against Russia. So, he's like a hardcore guy, a lifelong mercenary. And he's admitted on video because, again, there was video of members of the Georgian Legion shooting a captive Russian soldier. The New York Times even reported on this, believe it or not. And he was asked to comment on it, and he was like, "Look, well, it's not we don't take Russians. That's not our policy. We don't hold Russians captive. We tie their hands and their feet." And again, this is in response to the video of his men summarily executing a captive POW. And to bring it all back to NAFO,
which is just
that's a war crime.
Yeah, it's a war crime. I think a lot of people don't know what a war crime is or isn't, and that's considered a war crime.
Yeah. So again, NAFO, this online troll operation that harasses people both supportive of the Russian government or just simply questioning the Ukrainian government, they've raised more than $1 million for the Georgian Legion. The Georgian Legion, they participate in crowdfunding campaigns like Sign My Rocket, which allows you pay and it's go to signmyrocket.com. You can do it. And you pay to have a message written on a rocket, and then they shoot that rocket for you, and take a picture and tweet it.
It sounds like when the U.S. Texan soldiers were dipping their bullets in pork fat because they thought it would harm the Muslims more.
Yeah, I mean, and that's and they called them orcs. So that's the term you hear a lot from the Georgian Legion. They're very open about celebrating the death of Russian soldiers, which, I mean, I think that in itself is not totally uncommon or particularly offensive. But there are, again, these war crimes that are just, I mean, the accusations are so widespread. It's very difficult to ignore them. Somehow the mainstream media has done it. One of the most notorious former members of the Georgian Legion is an American guy by the name of Craig Lang, who is wanted. He's a fugitive in Ukraine, where he's considered a hero. In the United States, he's wanted for a double homicide while he was in Donetsk in 2014, 2015, fighting with the Georgian Legion and other groups like Right Sector. The FBI has video of him injecting a woman with adrenaline so that she wouldn't pass out while he drowns her. Again, a war crime. Civilian, this was done to, no less. He came back to the United States. He wanted to go back to Ukraine or go to Venezuela to try to overthrow the government there. And he did go to Colombia and was armed by the Colombian police to take part in a regime change operation in Venezuela. But in the United States, to pay for his travels, he posted an ad that he was selling guns. And when a couple from Florida responded that they wanted to buy these guns, he met up with them and murdered them and took their money to pay for his travels. So he's in Ukraine, once again, fighting. And again, a former member of the Georgian Legion. So, this is like all this crazy stuff. And then on the other hand, I found, if you go back to the commander's Facebook page, Mamuka's Facebook page, there's all kinds of photographs of him in Washington, D.C., meeting with members of Congress. So really? he's very tight with the United States foreign policy establishment. Senators Feinstein and Gillibrand, where he posted photographs outside their office. But he's got photographs with a number of, I think it's like 6 or 7 or 8 members of the House of Representatives, including the House Foreign Policy chairman, the committee chairman at the time, Elliot Engel. So, this is a guy who's got access. He's very well known. Adam Kinzinger, he had a meeting with him recently as well. So those other meetings that happened years ago are separate from this meeting. And Kinzinger posted a photograph of his Zoom call with Mamuka. Again, a guy who has said that they will kill captive Russian soldiers. That's their policy. Meeting openly with a member of Congress. I guess he's out now. So thank goodness. So it's all very dirty, and at the same time, the gray zone is the only one talking about it.
Yeah.
So I think that
which, like you mentioned before, is not has made you all those of you who work at the gray zone and a tiny handful of other people the center of the hordes of online attacks from these NAFO trolls.
Yeah, and I'm asked a lot of times why I don't block them, and what I say is that it would take me hours to go through and block the 1,000 dog cartoon avatars because they use a Shiba Inu avatar.
Yeah,
and block them individually.
I showed some earlier, and I meant to mention that it's not that image is not meant to be a joke. It's actually what they tend to have.
Yeah, well, I mean that it is a joke because I designed it, but
No,
it is
I mean,
exactly.
they actually use that though.
Yeah, and those dogs, I took them directly from their repository,
Right.
and just put them over that photo. But I lost my train of thought. The where were we?
You were saying you couldn't block.
Oh
them
yeah,
all.
I could. I mean, I could block them all, but it would take me all kinds of time. And the thing is I spend 45 seconds writing a tweet, and then collectively they spend hours ratioing me. So who's losing more time here? So that's why I don't block them. And also I think it's kind of a sign of weakness. But this morning, this is a big deal because this group has been endorsed by, again, members of NATO, heads of state, foreign ministers, defense ministers, members of Congress. And apparently this morning I was sent a video of Polish media talking about my reporting on NAFO for 9 minutes, and just denouncing me as a Russian propagandist. And you see that despite their attitude, which is very blasé, very irreverent, they're unabashed trolls, that a nerve has been struck in exposing this as a crowdfunding operation for war criminals. And beyond that, it was founded by an anti-Semite. You very briefly scrolled over screenshots of its founders' old tweets, which mocked Jewish people in the Holocaust and seemingly praised Adolf Hitler. So,
which fits in with the fact that our mainstream media and our government is now promoting the Azov Battalion, which is a largely Nazi organization, and they seem to have no problem with it. I mean, one of the articles you wrote was about Jon Stewart giving a medal to one of these Nazis at Disney World, which seemed about as dystopian as I can imagine.
Yeah.
a Jewish comedian that I, as a young man, respected, giving a gold medal to a man with a Nazi emblem on his elbow is truly unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me that story as a youth when I was Jon Stewart's biggest fan and Tucker Carlson's biggest hater, I would not have believed you. But oddly enough, Tucker Carlson covered that story. So I didn't get any credit for it, but it is what it is. That was a really bizarre case. I don't know if you want to really talk about it more, but
sure, we got time.
Yeah. So I actually came to that story because I was just going through Google. I have the Google News app on my phone, and I go through it every morning just to see what's being discussed. And actually, I get a lot of my stories from reading the mainstream media and just kind of like looking a little bit deeper into the things that they talk about. Doing my own research.
Right.
But there was this article from the Sun UK, which is a trash tabloid, and it was like Ukrainian delegation arrives at Warrior Games 2022. So that had enough like red flags in that that I was like,
what is Warrior Games?
Yeah, what is Warrior Games? Where is it? Why is it? So I clicked the article and I started researching the Warrior Games, and it's like a Pentagon-sponsored sports competition featuring wounded veterans from various friendly militaries. 2022 was
which just that is so. We're gonna bring the people who were wounded in our insane wars over and have them compete in events and get medals is at Disney World is so bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll tell you, I don't swim half as well as some of these guys who only have like one limb. So,
Right.
But it was an absurd thing to watch, because you do have this very pro-military, and it's like watching ESPN, right? Like that was the vibe, right? And at the same time, you have guys coming out with no legs in a wheelchair to participate in a swimming competition, and be, at the same time, it's celebrating the military and celebrating heroism and those kinds of terms. So it was very sick to watch.
And the image I'm showing now shows on his elbow. If anyone who's familiar with a swastika can see all of the elements that have been turned into some sort of elbow tattoo.
Yeah, that's a Sonnenrad, and actually that's the same symbol that was used by the young kid who shot up the black grocery store in Buffalo recently. It's the same symbol that was used by the New Zealand mosque shooter, and the same symbol that by this guy was used, and by the Azov Battalion, popularized, I would say. I mean, of course, it was originally popularized by the National Socialist Party of Germany, but more recently it's been given this new life by the Azov Battalion as one of their main symbols, and featured prominently in its logo, which I guess they've now changed. But the Warrior Games. So I started looking into the Ukrainian delegation. I said to myself, well, we have a bunch of Ukrainian veterans. How many of them are Nazis? And it turns out that the ones that I could actually find any kind of information on, there were two of them, were both members of Nazi organizations, specifically Azov and Right Sector. So those are the two that were really hyped up at these events. So Igor Halushka, the guy that's featured on the photograph, he I believe it was at the Hague, actually, in the Hague, participated in a similar competition called the Invictus Games, which is like basically the same thing, but it's sponsored by the United Kingdom instead of the US. Prince Harry went to a Warrior Games thing and then decided that he was going to do that. So at that event, he whipped out an Azov flag, and this was back in April. So I'm like, okay, I'll keep my eye on this guy. And I watched for a week all of these competitions on the website of the Warrior Games.
I do not envy you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't emphasize how absurd it was. And it was weird. I'll comment on one other weird element, because not only was it like the celebration of heroism, but you have guys, again, you have like a guy who's obese. He's got one leg, no arms, and he's competing against like a guy that like has no visible injuries. Like he's like ripped, and I'm sure he had some kind of head trauma or something. But
I will say that I've had this same question about the Paralympics, because I am totally all for people with handicaps being able to live their dreams. But I remember seeing an interview with one girl who had been on the level to be an Olympic swimmer, and she was in college, and she like fell off a balcony and ended up with all these injuries, and one foot is now like kind of paralyzed, or she doesn't have feeling in it or something, and she wins all of the swimming meets.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I mean, there should be divisions,
I'm like,
right?
Who's going up against people with no legs? Like, how is that fair?
Yeah. So it was a really absurd week for me. But I had a feeling from seeing this Igor Halushka pull out this Azov flag in the Hague, and I had a feeling he was going to do some other stuff, and he did. So when he was awarded his gold medal for indoor rowing, he wore an Azov shirt, and then later he was at the closing ceremony, which was keynoted by Jon Stewart, was awarded as the heart of his team. He was given the heart of his team award. So the heart of the Ukrainian team is the guy with the Nazi tattoo.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
go figure. And again, he wasn't the only one. And there's pictures of that I pulled up from the Ukrainian team's Facebook page of them performing fascist salutes. So he's not the only one that of the team that is a Nazi. And I actually called. For some reason, they had the PR guy, his phone number listed on the website. So I called him, and I first started asking like some, I forget what the question was exactly, but some softballs. And then I was like, who pays for these teams to come? And that's when he's like, oh, well, I know you said you're a freelancer, but what website is this going on? And he wouldn't give me a straight answer.
That's when you said New York Times online.
Yeah. It's the Veterans Project USA or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, he wouldn't give me a straight answer. He gave me this very convoluted explanation, and really the only detail that made any sense whatsoever was him saying that the relationship with every foreign team is different. So I assume, if we're sending over, what is it, like 60 billion at this point, we're probably paying for the Ukrainian team.
I'm sure. It's the least of what we're paying for. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the I think the bassist or the singer from Hootie and the Blowfish was also there. And these,
that is the one thing that harmed my view of Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah, but it was an absurd story because, and it's weird because, if I hadn't spent that week watching this weirdness, nobody would have known about it. The Defense Department's visual distribution service, DVIDs, they posted photographs so the picture of Igor with the Azov shirt and the gold medal, that's from their website. So, I know that journalists look at that website pretty frequently, for visual elements in their stories, because it's Creative Commons, so you can just reuse whatever they post. So I'm sure that there were journalists that were somewhat aware of this, but none of them cared to report on it.
Yeah, just unbelievable. So let's move on to the Anti-Defamation League. This is maybe your most recent or one of your more recent articles, and you contacted them about the Azov Battalion, right?
Well, I contacted them about that story that we just discussed. Yeah, because so on their website, they have an option to report a hate incident. So I went to their website and filed a hate incident report because, here's this guy with a Sonnenrad tattoo, hosted and honored by the Pentagon and Jon Stewart. So I was kind of trolling, I thought it wasn't going to be much more than a tweet saying that, I filed this report and, hey, what's up, guys? Aren't we defending the Jewish people?
Right. So for those who don't know, Anti-Defamation League is an organization that basically exclusively goes after hate speech done against Jewish people, which I support the concept of. However, they don't exactly do that.
Yeah, it's mostly an organization dedicated to targeting and ruining the lives of, pro-Palestine activists. Back during the the fight against apartheid in South Africa, they actually spied on anti-apartheid activists and sold their information to the apartheid government. More recently, they've been very busy going after Kyrie Irving, Dave Chappelle, Kanye West, and I would say Kanye West before he put the mask on and became, Darth Vader. But yeah, so the ADL, it's supposed to defend Jewish people, be anti-Nazi. Its director is Jonathan Greenblatt's a former member of the Obama administration. They're very much a part of the Democratic Party propaganda apparatus and the Israel lobby. Part of that too. So I kind of trollingly filed this hate incident report. And I forget how many months, but I think it was like 4 months before I heard anything back. And they apologized to me because it had taken so long, because their center on countering extremism was researching my inquiry, some shit like that.
For 4 months, yeah.
Yeah, and they came back and they said, well, I just want to be clear. The majority of my incident report did not focus on the Azov Battalion. I mentioned the Azov Battalion once because this guy was a former member. It was about how this guy, you can see a screenshot of my incident report, but I mentioned that he has a Nazi tattoo. I mentioned that other members of the team were part of other Nazi groups and performing fascist salutes and all that. And I gave them a link to my article, and I filed all kinds of photographic supporting evidence and all that. But their response ignored everything except for the Azov Battalion. They didn't mention Jon Stewart. They didn't mention the Pentagon. They didn't mention Igor Halushka. They only talked about the Azov Battalion, and it boiled down to 2 paragraphs about the Azov Battalion, just totally whitewashing them. Painting them as reformed, no longer associated with Andrei Belitsky, who is the founder of the Azov Battalion, who vowed to lead the white races of the world in the final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. They said they're no longer associated, they're reformed, they're depoliticized, and not the far-right group they once were. So I
Which
took
is
that
laughable.
It's laughable, and it's very easily debunked, right? Just the week before I wrote this article, I had done a story about a neo-Nazi organization that got raided in Italy called the Order of Hagel, and they were planning to, attack a shopping center. And they were tied to the Azov Battalion. One of their members, the guy who was planning to blow up the shopping mall or attack it, I shouldn't say blow up. I don't know. He's fighting with the Azov Battalion right now. And then if you go to any number of interviews, and I kind of go over some of these interviews in the ADL piece, but that's okay. Former members of Azov will openly say that there's a lot of Nazis, and they claim, it's no longer associated with Beletsky. And then, a week before they wrote me that, Beletsky was giving a speech at a ceremony in Kiev, renaming a street after the Azov Battalion. So he's very much associated. He's very much the ideological leader. The ADL itself has used any number of terms describing the Azov Battalion as basically neo-Nazi. They've said explicit ties to neo-Nazis. They noted back in March, so after the Russian invasion, that white supremacists, the international white supremacist movement, sees Azov as a pathway to the creation of a national socialist state in Ukraine. So this is a longtime target of the ADL. They've had many articles, blog posts, etc., research papers attacking Azov. And now, all of a sudden, 8 months, 9 months into the war, Azov are freedom fighters and reformed and depoliticized and no longer the far right group they once were. The thing is here is that all of this is happening because of Azov's importance in the city of Mariupol. Because Mariupol is in the south of Donbass. It's not controlled by pro-Russian separatists, the People's Republic of Donetsk or Lugansk. It is controlled by the Azov Battalion, and it has been since 2014. So Azov's really always been very important. And if you go back to some of my early work on this back in February, Azov has prevented Zelensky from implementing any kind of peace agreement in the past. They've been able to thwart his agenda. When Zelensky told his troops in a town called Zalot that they had to leave because there was going to be peace, Azov said, "We're not leaving. We're sending more guys." And there were all kinds of threats to kill Zelensky at the time. So
this is kind of what Scott Ritter said to me, which is that, yeah, the Nazis within the Ukrainian military may not be a very high percentage, but they are the ones willing to use extreme violence to get whatever they want. So when a politician says, "I'm going to do A, B, or C,"
yeah.
and the guys who really are willing to kill say, "We will kill you,"
Yeah,
those politicians generally back off.
Right. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like all the time I'm criticized for allegedly promoting this idea that all Ukrainians are Nazis, or that like the majority of the Ukrainian military or government is Nazi, and it's not. But the thing is that the Nazis have a whole hell of a lot of political power.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. When they'll show up to your house and pull you out, they've done it. They will shut down any kind of liberal demonstration back, in Mariupol. If you go back over the years, pride parades were shut down by Azov. They were doing all these things that don't comport with this liberal idea we have of them now, or that's being promoted now. But I want to emphasize that they do have all this political power because they controlled Mariupol, because Mariupol was so important to the rest of Ukraine's assault on Donbass because of its location. It's on the water, and it's in the south of Donbass. So they became very powerful from that. And once the Battle of Mariupol happened in April, it became clear to editors at mainstream media publications, New York Times, Washington Post, they all that if Azov looked bad, it blew the whole campaign apart. So they started rebranding Azov as controversial defenders of Ukraine, as a group with a checkered history, but on the up and up. And so at this point, because the ADL hasn't said anything about Azov since March, it was obvious that they had to change their tune, and they changed their tune to me privately, not in the capacity of an official statement or as a media comment, but as a response to a hate incident report.
Right.
So I think that's important to note, but I think that it also, now that I've reported it, it also kind of it will not be surprising to see more public defense of Azov from the ADL going forward, which is really sick. I mean,
Well, it undermines everything they stand for. It basically is saying we are so far gone from our so-called mission statement that we will defend Nazis.
Yeah, and I mean, again, Azov is a group that are the ideological successors of Stepan Bandera. They openly worship Stepan Bandera, the Nazi collaborator who killed over 100,000 Jewish people with his organization of Ukrainian nationalists, Poles, Slavs, communists, anyone that was not sufficiently, Germanic. But the this is like part of, because you have this, I want to call it a corruption of Jewish institutions, right? And you know all about this, Lee. Early on in the war, there was a bit of fake news that Zelensky himself even promoted, saying that Russia had bombed the memorial site for Babin Yar, which is a ravine near Kiev where there were 100,000 people executed by the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, Stepan Bandera's group, Jews and prisoners of war and that kind of thing. So there's a memorial there, and Zelensky and the media had claimed that Russia had bombed it, and it turned out an Israeli reporter went there and he said there was no damage. So it's totally fake news. But I pointed this out to the Auschwitz Museum, and I noted that, on the way, pretty much if you're going to go visit Babin Yar, you're going to have to drive through Stepan Bandera Avenue in Kiev. So I pointed this out to the Auschwitz Museum on Twitter, who were tweeting about Russia allegedly bombing this location, and they blocked me. They just blocked me, So you have this corruption of Jewish institutions where they're so tied to one or the other political party that they no longer stand for Jews, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it honestly makes anti-Semitism easier to achieve because they have diluted what it means and actually misdirected what it means, so that it's as if it doesn't exist anymore. It's like, if you're going to call people that are just trying to speak the truth about Ukraine, literally the truth of what's going on there, you're going to call them anti-Semitic, and you're going to call anyone who speaks the truth about Israel anti-Semitic, and you're going to call Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitic, and it's like, then the real anti-Semitism, which is these Nazis that they're allying themselves with, becomes meaning. Like it loses all meaning, and which is so you get yourself in a place where it can be allowable. Anti-Semitism and hate towards Jews can be allowable because it has been so, I don't know, convoluted and diluted, and it's just it means nothing.
Yeah, and again, you have in Ukraine this situation where there's a lot of foreign people who are ideologically motivated, to say the least, going over there to fight. And this is documented. And if you go back in the mainstream media over the past 8 years, they talked a lot about this. This wasn't a secret. And so you have all these people that are members of, Atomwaffen division of the Rise Above movement, all these groups that really were targets of the left in the United States for the past years. You have neo-Nazi organizations throughout Europe. I documented a bank robber, a Norwegian bank robber who went over to fight with Azov. All these people that are really like the really sick and just kind of cancers on society, going over to Ukraine to live out this fantasy of theirs, because they see that the neo-Nazi movements in their countries are failures. What did the neo-Nazi movement achieve in the United States? They killed a woman in Charlottesville. That's it. They haven't done anything. So they look at Azov.
I will say they nearly killed you and me there, though.
I know. Yeah, that's right. We were both there. Yeah. So, I feel like that would have been a little bit more something to show for themselves. At least they got some Jews, like, but
Yeah.
some Jewish media people, you know.
Right. Right.
But but they look at the Azov battalion as people, as Nazis who have their shit together, as people who as these defenders of the white race who actually are able to do something, and so they want to learn from them. They want to be able to bring back those lessons to their home countries so that they can organize better. I mean, you see all the time paramilitary trainings, right? From what's that group that's been in the headlines? Patriot Front, right? There's all these leaked videos of their paramilitary trainings. That group in Italy I was talking about, Order of Hagel, they were doing paramilitary. This is something that's very common for neo-Nazi organizations. Azov's doing the real thing. They're actually at war. And again, they do have a lot of political power. And the ADL was 100% right in March when they said that the international white supremacist movement sees Azov as a pathway to the establishment of National Socialism in Ukraine. It's and again, armed by foreign governments, open support from NATO for Azov, and not. I mean, we're sending all these weapons, and we're just not looking at any of the potential for blowback in our countries. And I really fear for what's to come. I mean, we saw when Gaddafi was overthrown in Libya, there were terrorist attacks in Europe as a direct result of the support from NATO for jihadist groups. So we're just doing all that again, but of a different color. And I mean, go ahead, Lee.
Well, I was just gonna say we only got a couple of minutes left, but I kind of wanted to shift to, I guess, what keeps you going, because you have been so thoroughly. I mean, I certainly went through it, but not as recently, back when I had Redacted Tonight. But you've been so thoroughly attacked by these trolls and these garbage human beings, and so I'm wondering what drives you in your journalism in these last few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I got into journalism because in 2014 I was covering Black Lives Matter protests, but I was going to these protests before I was covering them, and I would open up the New York Post and just read all kinds of lies about the things that I was at, and I realized that the media lies a lot.
Yeah,
a lot more. I mean, I knew they lied, but it's like a lot more than I had realized.
It actually helped me realize that when I was at Occupy in the first few days of Occupy, and then I would hear the reports about what Occupy was, and I was like, no, I was there. It's not that at all.
Right. Yeah, and so I guess what keeps me going is just making the lives of bastards a little bit more difficult.
I like that.
Yeah. I'd like to think that I help, but I don't think so. I think I just make the lives of bastards a little bit more difficult.
Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Alex, how can people continue to follow your work?
On Twitter at Real Alex Ruby, that's RUBI, and just at the Gray Zone. I have a Substack. You get free email updates on all my reporting, little previews of everything that comes out. So subscribe. It's totally free. It's not spammy. And follow me on Twitter.
All right. Thanks again, man. Be well.
Lee, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, folks, for being here. As most of you already know, we are completely sustained by you guys. There's no giant corporate entities. There's no ads, other than, a couple that YouTube might stick on there. But we are completely funded and owned by you. You own us. So please become one of the owners at patreon.com/behind the headlines. That's the Patreon that sustains this show, this interview show I've started. as well as Most Censored News, my other show. And I'll put it in the comment section for those of you who haven't seen the latest Most Censored News. It is on the our radioactive water supply, which I feel like is something you should know about. It's not for those of you who worry, it's not all of our water is radioactive. It's just a lot of it. It's just some of it. But anyway, go watch that video if you haven't already seen it. Most Censored News. But yes, we are completely independent, completely supported by you. This is a project with Mint Press. If you don't know Mint Press, you should definitely check them out. And I hope you'll become a member on all of those things and keep fighting. Oh, and next week, Stella Morris. Don't miss that one. Julian Assange's wife will be joining me, assuming her schedule doesn't get too insane. So next, I believe it's Tuesday, but I'll be sending out alerts and everything. So check back, and I will be speaking to Stella Morris.